Everyone talks about Kansas City being one of the most affordable cities in the country, while Chicago is known for its high cost of living, but big city perks. But which one is actually the better place to live? It's not as simple as just looking at rent prices or home costs. There's way more that goes into this decision. Kansas City and Chicago, two major Midwestern cities, but they couldn't be more different. One is a fast-paced city with world-class dining, top-paying jobs, and a skyline that people recognize all over the world. The other, a growing city with more affordable lifestyle, a housing market that's still reasonable compared to other metros, and a quality of life that many people say is a hidden gem.
So today, we're putting these two cities head to head and breaking down every factor that matters. Cost of living, job opportunities, transportation, crime, and overall lifestyle. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which city might be the better fit for you and which one could be a financial mistake. And if you're new to the channel, we're Kat and Melanie, realtors here in Kansas City, helping people find the best place to call home. If you're thinking about moving to Kansas City or just curious about life here, be sure to subscribe for more videos and reach out to us when you're ready to get started. So let's start with the number one thing that affects most people: cost of living.
Cost of living is a huge factor when deciding where to live, and the difference between Kansas City and Chicago is pretty significant. But it's not just about what the average rent or home price is. It's about what your paycheck actually gets you in each city. Let's start with buying a home. Right now, the median home price in Kansas City is $285,000. That gets you a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home in a solid neighborhood, possibly with a yard, a garage, and some space to breathe. In some areas, you can even get a home for under $250,000, though competition has been driving prices up. Now let's compare that to Chicago. The median home price in Chicago is about $325,000, which might not seem like a massive jump, but what you get for that price is completely different. In Chicago, a $325,000 home might be a 2-bedroom condo instead of a house. If you want a single-family home, you're looking at $400,000 or more. And if you want to be in one of the best areas, you'll need to spend closer to $600,000 to $700,000. But the biggest difference: property taxes. In Kansas City, the average property tax is 0.93%. That means for a $285,000 home, you're paying about $2,650 per year in property taxes. In Chicago, the property tax rate is over 2%, which means for that $325,000 home, you're paying more than $6,500 per year in taxes. And if you buy something bigger, the number skyrockets. So even though home prices in Kansas City and Chicago aren't that far apart, your monthly payment in Chicago will be hundreds of dollars more just because of taxes. Now, what if you're renting? This is where Kansas City has a clear advantage. The average 1-bedroom apartment downtown in Kansas City costs about $1,350 per month. If you move out to the suburbs, you can rent a 2-bedroom apartment for about $1,800. And if you're really looking for a deal, there are parts of Kansas City where you can still rent an entire house for under $2,000 a month. Chicago, that's a whole different story. A 1-bedroom apartment in downtown Chicago starts at $2,400 per month, and that's for something basic. If you want a high rise with updated amenities, you're easily looking at $3,000 plus. A 2-bedroom apartment, those average around $3,200 or more per month. And in the more desirable neighborhoods, it's not unusual for rent prices to hit $4,000 plus per month for a decent sized place. So if you're renting, the difference is massive. You could literally rent a full house in Kansas City for the price of a small apartment in Chicago. But housing isn't the only expense that matters. Let's talk about what you'll actually be paying every month just to be in these cities. Even if you can afford a home or an apartment, you still have to deal with the cost of utilities and everyday bills. And this is where the differences between Kansas City and Chicago really start to add up fast. Let's start with electricity and gas. Kansas City's summers are brutal, and winters can get freezing, so you'll feel it in your utility bills. In July, when the AC is running all day, an electric bill for a 1,500 square foot house can easily hit $250 per month. In the winter, the gas bills will likely be around $200 per month because Kansas City has some pretty cold months, but here's where Chicago is worse. Chicago's winters last longer, and the heating bills, they can hit $300 or more per month, especially in older buildings that don't have great insulation. So not only is housing in Chicago more expensive, but your monthly utilities will also be higher just because of the climate and energy costs. Then there's groceries and gas. Food prices have been rising everywhere, but they're still noticeably cheaper in Kansas City compared to Chicago. A gallon of milk in Kansas City costs around $4.50. In Chicago, it's about $5.25. A dozen eggs, Kansas City, it's $3.75, but closer to $4.50 in Chicago. A pound of ground beef, around $6 in Kansas City, but it's $7.50 or more in Chicago. And if you're driving, gas prices follow the same trend. Right now, gas in Kansas City is about $3.50 per gallon. In Chicago, it's closer to $4.30 per gallon. And that's not counting the additional gas taxes Chicago has that make filling up your tank even more expensive. So let's put this all together. If you're renting, Kansas City is the clear winner. Renting is $1,000 plus cheaper per month, and you can get way more space for your money. If you're buying, Kansas City has lower home prices and much lower property taxes, making home ownership way more affordable. Utilities in Kansas City are slightly lower, but grocery and gas prices is where the biggest differences show up. So if you're looking for a city where you can stretch your dollar, Kansas City is the clear winner. But if you're focused on higher paying jobs and more career opportunities, then Chicago still might be worth it if you can handle all the added costs. And that brings us to the next big question. Where will you actually make more money? Because even if Chicago is more expensive, it might make up for it with the higher salaries and more job options.
Even if Kansas City is cheaper, does that matter if you can make more money in Chicago? Let's break down where the job opportunities are and how much you can actually expect to make. First, let's talk salaries. The average salary in Kansas City is around $65,000 per year. In Chicago, it's higher, around $80,000 per year. But here's the thing, does that extra salary make up for the cost of living? Let's say you're making $80,000 in Chicago. After taxes, rent, and basic expenses, you might be left with about $20,000 to $25,000 of discretionary income. Now let's say you make $65,000 in Kansas City. Even though your salary is lower, your rent is much cheaper, your taxes are lower, and you're spending less on everyday expenses. So after the basics, you could still be left with $20,000 or more in discretionary income. So while the salary gap is real, you don't actually end up with that much more money if you're living in Chicago. But what about job availability? Chicago has a much bigger job market. It's a hub for finance, marketing, tech, healthcare, and corporate headquarters. Companies like Boeing, United Airlines, McDonald's, and even Walgreens have headquarters in Chicago. What about Kansas City? It's growing, but it's still smaller. Major industries here include tech, logistics, engineering, and healthcare. Companies like Garmin, Cerner, Hallmark, and T-Mobile have major offices in Kansas City. So if you're in finance, corporate law, or marketing, Chicago is probably the better move. But if you work in tech, logistics, or engineering, Kansas City offers solid opportunities without the high cost of living. At the end of the day, both cities have strong job markets, but Kansas City is a little more competitive when it comes to finding high-paying jobs, while Chicago has more options at a higher pay scale.
Kansas City and Chicago have completely different approaches to transportation. One is built for cars, and the other is built for public transportation. So let's start with the most important question. Do you need a car to live in either of these cities? In Kansas City, the answer is yes. Kansas City is a driving city. Everything is spread out and public transportation options are pretty limited. While there is a streetcar downtown, it only covers a small section of the city, and the bus system isn't nearly as developed as other metros. If you want to live in Kansas City and get around easily, you need a car. But the upside, driving in Kansas City is incredibly easy compared to Chicago. There are no toll roads anywhere in the metro. Traffic is light compared to major cities. A 30-minute drive in KC actually means 30 minutes, not an hour sitting in stop-and-go traffic. Parking is cheap or free in most areas, even downtown. Now let's talk about driving in Chicago. If you plan to have a car in Chicago, you're going to be in for a rougher time. Traffic is bad. If you're commuting during rush hour, expect to spend 45 minutes to an hour in traffic just to go 10 miles. Parking is expensive. Street parking is limited, and garages in downtown Chicago charge anywhere between $25 to $50 per day. And those tolls, they add up fast. Driving on the highways around Chicago means dealing with constant toll booths, and those fees can quickly add up to hundreds of dollars per month. So if driving in Kansas City is the better option, what about public transportation? This is where Chicago wins by miles. Chicago has one of the best public transportation systems in the country. The CTA trains and buses make it possible to live in the city without a car at all. The L train system covers the entire metro, including both airports, so you can get pretty much anywhere without needing to drive. The bus network is massive and runs frequently, even late at night. Commuter rail lines connect to suburbs to the city, so you don't have to deal with traffic if you live outside of downtown. Kansas City does have a streetcar, but it's really only useful if you live and work in a small section of downtown. The bus system is there, but it's not as reliable or well connected as the CTA in Chicago. So if you want easy driving, Kansas City Metro wins. If you want great public transit, Chicago wins. At the end of the day, it really depends on your lifestyle. If you want to own a car, park for free, and avoid traffic, Kansas City is the better choice. If you want to live in a walkable city and never worry about driving, Chicago is the better choice.
All right, let's talk about crime. Both Kansas City and Chicago have a reputation for higher than average crime rates, but which one is actually worse? Let's look at violent crime first. Chicago has a reputation for being one of the most dangerous cities in America. If you watch the news, it feels like there's a new headline every day about shootings, robberies, and gang violence. And while crime is a real issue in parts of the city, a lot of it is concentrated in specific neighborhoods. Most of Chicago's violent crime happens in South and West Side neighborhoods like Englewood, Garfield Park, and Austin. But in areas like Lincoln Park, River North, or the suburbs, crime is much lower. Now here's the part that might surprise you. Kansas City actually has a higher violent crime rate per capita. That means, based on the number of people living in each city, you're statistically more likely to experience violent crime in Kansas City than in Chicago. But just like Chicago, it really depends on where you live. Most of Kansas City's crime is concentrated in certain areas east of Troost Avenue and parts of Independence Avenue. If you live in areas like Overland Park, Olathe, or parts of Lee Summit, crime is much lower. So what about property crime? Kansas City has a much higher rate of car thefts and break-ins. If you leave your car unlocked overnight in some parts of the city, there's a real chance it won't be there in the morning. Chicago also has a high property crime rate, but it's mostly concentrated in downtown areas where carjackings and break-ins happen more frequently. So which city is actually safer? If you're looking at total crime numbers, Chicago has more crime simply because it's a much larger city. If you're looking at crime per capita, Kansas City's crime has a much higher frequency. But in both cities, it really depends on where you live. At the end of the day, safety comes down to the neighborhood, not the city as a whole.
All right, we've covered the numbers. Now let's talk about what it's actually like to live in these cities. Let's start with entertainment and nightlife. Chicago is on a completely different level when it comes to entertainment. If you want world-class restaurants, Chicago has some of the best in the country. You've got Michelin-starred dining, deep dish pizzas, and a food scene that rivals New York and LA. If you love nightlife, Chicago has it all. Rooftop bars, nightclubs, live music venues, and endless events happening every weekend. Major sports teams, Chicago has the Bears, the Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs, and White Sox. Now, Kansas City still has plenty to offer. The barbecue scene is second to none, and there are some fantastic local breweries. Nightlife is more low-key, but there are still great spots in Westport, the Plaza, and downtown. Sports, the Kansas City Chiefs and Royals bring plenty of energy to the city. So if you want big city entertainment, Chicago wins. But if you want a more relaxed lifestyle, but still with great food and sports, Kansas City holds its own. So after breaking everything down, which city is the better choice? Kansas City is better if you want more affordable housing and lower rent, you prefer easy driving with low traffic and free parking, or you're looking for a relaxed, family-friendly atmosphere. Chicago is better if you want higher paying jobs and more career opportunities, you love big city entertainment, dining, and nightlife, or you just want walkability and excellent public transportation. So it really just depends on your lifestyle and priorities.
So what do you think? Would you rather live in Kansas City or Chicago? Let us know in the comments. And if you're thinking about moving to Kansas City, check out our guide to the best and worst neighborhoods before you buy a home. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more videos about living in Kansas City. We're Kat and Melanie of the Lewis Tickton Group Realtors, and remember, there's no place like home here in Kansas City.